Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Do Therapy, a show dedicated to men on their journey to mental wellness. Today we're talking about part 2 on how to begin therapy. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Do Therapy. I am your host, Rene Garcia. Really glad for you to be here today. Today we're talking about part 2 on how to begin therapy. All right, so before we get going on part 2 of our 3-part series, I want you to just take a quick second and subscribe below, turn on the notifications so you can get our weekly shows. One of the things that I wanted to do in breaking this down into 3 different sections is really to address just a lot of the mindset and the actions that come into basically initiating therapy. A lot of people sometimes say, hey, you just got to begin therapy. Just start it out. It's no big deal. But there's actually a couple steps you need to take and before you actually sit down in front of someone. So before we get on to this episode, just take a quick second, jump to our last week's episode on the kind of mindset and really the idea of change and what you're bringing into the therapy room before we even put the wheels to the ground and what we're talking about today. All right. So, like I said, today is part 2. So, the last episode we talked about is the kind of mindset you had going into therapy. Today, we're going to talk about how to initiate therapy. And today, I brought 6 steps, things to think about. All right. So, step number 1, I want you to think about before you even make the call and initiate into therapy is you have to really understand what are your benefits. Okay. So, step 1, know your benefits. If you do have insurance, we're going to come back to this idea, so I'm going to talk to my insured at this point. If you do have insurance, the first thing I would probably ask you to do is to get on the phone, call the number on the back of the ID card, and really just get information about what your behavioral health benefits are, okay? A lot of the times, or at least more times than not, a lot of people don't realize that they maybe do have some benefits that they're unaware of, and the ones I'm specifically talking about is what we call the Employee Assistance Program, or EAP for short, okay? EAP. The EAP benefits are basically free therapy sessions that your company has already paid for, and it's really just up to you to utilize them. And yes, it may come with some stipulations, like you kind of have to provide or find one of their providers that is accepting the EAP benefit. But essentially, if you can save some money and not pay for some therapy, hey, wow, what a great way to get some free sessions in and also to get some help along the way. All right. So number 1, I want you to know what is covered by your insurance. Know if you have the EAP benefits. And the other thing that I always get questions about also is in-network versus out-of-network providers. In order for a therapist or a clinician to be an in-network with a provider, they have to go through certain loops and certain kind of restrictions, providing notes, providing feedback directly to the insurance in order for those sessions to be covered or approved. A lot of therapists choose not to go in network with a insurance provider. For them, sometimes it can be a way for it to be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more less restrictions on treatment planning, and a little bit less control on kind of what happens in the therapy room. I think there are great therapists that are both in-network and out-of-network providers. I think it really just depends on what your feeling is in your sessions with them, and kind of, again, do you feel as though their skill set is able to meet the needs that you have at that moment? Okay, so that's probably the first thing I would do. Step 1, know your benefits. Okay. Step 2, you need to search a directory. Okay. One of the things I would ask you to do, let's say you do have insurance, you can ask your providers, your insurance providers, to give you a full list of providers that are local in your area and therapists that are, very close by or in an area that you would like to, do therapy. Let's say like you live in a bigger city, you live in a suburb area and you drive into town to, work. Well, the thing is sometimes it may be easier for you to have a therapist that's closer to your work, as you can just get off of work and go straight to them and then you can go home. So one thing you want to do is, again, while you're on the phone, knowing your benefits, checking your benefits, I would also encourage you to ask, okay, can I get a list of providers who are in my area or near the zip code, so I can at least know who is around that does take that insurance. Okay, so now we'll talk about for the people that do not have insurance. Let's say you don't have insurance and you're looking for a provider in other ways. You have to kind of go different ways. Well, I'll give you 3 very commonly used directories, at least some that I use in my hometown and my area. The first one I would encourage you to do is Psychology Today. All right, I'll post up some images here of Psychology Today. That's a really great resource for therapists that you can search by zip code. That one's pretty widely used amongst a lot of therapists, and you can get it usually nationwide for providers who are giving all sorts of services. Okay, the second one I would use is, or the other two that I would encourage you to check out, is Latinx Therapy. This was created by a therapist out in California, where they're more directly wanting to target the Latinx community or the Spanish-speaking community, or even the Hispanic background population. I would encourage you to use that one. And then finally, the last one that I have to give a shout out, just because they are from the H. Pew, 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 pew. These are my friends Ebony and Elisa, who created Melanin Mental Health. They are just awesome. Anybody that does anything successful from Houston, I'm going to shout them out with. I happen to know these people. I think they're awesome. They're great. And the things that they've done with the melanin and mental health have just been insane. And one of the great things they do have is they do have a directory of clinicians of color who provide services. And it's just really great. And they're awesome. So and I'm really happy to call them friends. So find a directory, search the directory. Each one of these directories have filters that you can either filter down by, gender, issue, training, licensure, things like that, which brings me to kind of, this next kind of idea, or the next step that I would say in initiating therapy is number 3 is know the difference in licenses. Okay. Know the differences in licenses and training. And I wouldn't even say training. I just kind of make it general to know what's the difference between a master's level therapist, a psychologist, and then, of course, a psychiatrist. Okay. A master's level therapist, which is basically what I am, is essentially a therapist who has gone to school, gone to some type of accredited university or sometimes non-accredited university, and has met the requirements for their state's license, for a master's level license. For instance, here in the state of Texas, I have a master's of science in psychology, and I have a couple of different licenses, a marriage and family therapist license and a professional counselor license. So I'm a master's level therapist. We treat general issues. Some of us specialize in trauma. Some of us specialize, like what I'm doing here, specifically treating adult men. And I think there's a lot of great master's level therapists out there. The PhD version of me, all right? So in other words, the one with more student loans, right, and the one with more training, that is a psychologist, okay? So master's level, next step up is your psychologist. Psychologists are master's level therapists, but a lot of times they specialize in very specific populations, trainings, communities. They're unbelievably well trained. They're experts in their field. A lot of them do testing. So if you're looking to get tested for, let's say, ADHD or autism spectrum, things like that, those are your psychologists. And I happen to be in a great area where I just have some really awesome psychologists around us here in the DFW area. And so, again, master's level licensure, which is me. PhD version of me is a psychologist. All right. The main difference that I want to clarify here is we do not prescribe medication, all right? Here in the United States, master's level licensures and PhDs do not prescribe medications. Even though I have gotten calls to say, hey man, can you give me some Xanax? No, I cannot get you Xanax, nor would I, even if I had the possibility and the capability to do so, all right? What happens is we have master's level licensures, PhD psychologist, and then we have our psychiatrists. Psychiatrists are, to me, just an enigma. I don't understand why anybody would be a psychiatrist. To me, it's just so much training, because basically a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who then takes extra residencies to develop or attain the ability to identify as a psychiatrist specializing in mental health issues. And the great thing about psychiatrists is that they're unbelievably well-trained and knowledgeable about the field of mental health. A lot of times in complaints that I've heard sometimes is that they are very busy and it's very hard to get into a psychiatrist's office. And a lot of times people will go into pretty high levels of care like mental health hospitals in order to see a psychiatrist. And so I think it depends on your area. I think it depends on your needs, and I also want to be just for you to be aware the differences between the three professionals of us in this mental health field. If you've never done therapy before, if you're looking to go into therapy to address some issues that you feel are difficult for you and that you may be impacting your life, a lot of times what I would do is encourage you starting off with a master's level license, because again, you may not need medications. You may not need testing. You may just need an environment that you need to process things. And that's what the master's level licensures are for. The psychologists, I think, are unbelievable. And I think there's some really great psychiatrists in the areas, which I would encourage you to, again, see if you feel that's needed. But I think a lot of the times, again, for low level, what we would call acute services, those master's level licensures are really talented and is a really great place to start if you've never done therapy before. All right. So that's number 3. Know the differences between the licenses. All right. Step number 4, have an idea about what you want to talk about in therapy. This does not have to be set in stone. This doesn't have to be something that you can never change. A lot of the times people will come in and say, hey, I think I'm just kind of sad. But then they come in and we start figuring out that they've been struggling with anxiety for a very long time. When we start initiating these calls to our clinicians, we kind of have to have an idea of what we're working with. Because here's the thing. One of the greatest things I've figured out as I've gotten further and further into this profession is I'm starting to recognize there are clients, and I've not even just starting, I've been recognizing that there are clients that I just know are not a good fit for me. But I know some other therapists that they would be perfect fits for. So if you have a general idea of what you're looking for, I would encourage you to be open and be candid. We're considered medical professionals, and so we have to keep everything as considered as private health information. This has recently been discussed a lot about HIPAA, so we cannot disclose this information unless you give us permission. The exceptions to that are you want to hurt or kill yourself, you want to hurt or kill somebody else, or you're abusing an elderly person or a child. Other than that, we're required by law to keep this between you and I, all right? So have an idea of what you want to discuss. Again, it doesn't have to be very, very specific. Just kind of have an idea so when you make that call, you're kind of ready to go, all right? Step number 5, make the call to schedule. You got to make the call. That's it. You've prepared for it. You pick up the phone, make a call. Remember, like for my business, a lot of master's level licensures, not all of them, but a lot of master's level licenses, we don't have secretaries. We're sole proprietors. We're answering our own phones. And so there may be a time where we don't answer your phone at that time, that phone call at that time. Leave a private message. Hey, I'd like to discuss some services. Please give me a call back. And I guarantee you we'll get you back as soon as possible. Okay? But again, you have to pick up the phone. You have to make the call. If you get a message, again, leave a message. And then also try a couple different ones if you found on the directory or in the information you got from your insurance company. Don't let just the one call not be great and then move on or just never go back to it. Make the call, schedule the appointment. Because that leads us to number 6. Attend the appointment. Go. The worst thing that can happen is it just doesn't work out and you go on to the next therapist. I cannot tell you how many times I have scheduled an appointment, had a person fill out all the information, and then homie never shows up. It happens more times than you think. All you got to do is go. The worst thing you can do, the worst thing we can tell you is that, you know what, I think somebody else would be more appropriate for you, and that's a good thing. That's a great therapist to me. A therapist who's self-aware to say, hey, you know what, I think this person may be better suited to help your needs is an awesome thing. So go, be open to it. There's a lot worse places to be than a therapy room. I'll tell you that right now. All right. So comment below. I want to know what you think. This was our episode on how to initiate that therapy call. I hope it was helpful because the next and last wrap up of this whole little episode and this whole little 3-part series is now the aftermath. You've gone to your first session and now what happens? All right. So again, like, share, subscribe, comment below, and I'll see y'all next week. All right. For our third and last part of this episode. Take care. Peace.